Uh-oh. That's not good. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, made it in. Okay, I'm gonna try and see about graphics. See, when I did this in the past, it shows this bar at the top, and so I don't see the whole screen. I get part of it cut off at the bottom. Looks like it might be okay this time, but we'll see how it works out. Oh yeah, no, we got a little. It's still glitching on me. I don't know. Minimize, maximize. Does that help? It does seem to help. All right. Resume saved. Awesome. Okay, so where are we at? That's not what I wanted to click. You see how the bottom of the screen here is being cut off because of this bar at the top. I wonder if I can maybe do like an F11. No. Oh man, that's bothersome. I'm going to have to quit to the main menu to fix that. Sorry, guys. Bear with me while I'm getting things set up. Should have just left it the way it was, but... yeah, it makes a difference. Okay. Resume saved. Load. Okay. So let's see what active contracts we have. Science student from the surface of Ike, which I'm not slated to do anytime soon. Explore Lathe. Position some satellites. Science data from Tylo. Rescue Madden from orbit. Position settling Q synchronous orbit. The materials bay, which is always fun. Okay. I don't really need money at the moment. I need science. Science is what I want. Oh, I didn't mean to necessarily completely reject it. But I just spent a lot of science on my tree. I've got a lot of my tree filled out here. Now, one of the problems that I have is that my last mission, which I did off, I didn't stream or record it, just played for myself. My last mission, I went to the moon with Val and Bob, and hopped to a couple different, 4 or 5 different biomes to get a bunch of science, which I succeeded. I got like 4,000 science. Fortunately, my planning, oh my goodness, okay, my planning for, I'm still getting distracted by all this stuff here. Let's maybe take this pure satellites off, relays off, yeah. Okay, so bottom line is Bob's in orbit. He couldn't quite make it because he literally, from the moon to here, he rode on a ladder. And that was difficult enough as it was. But, Val went ahead and entered atmosphere, but she had to leave Bob behind to do so. So, he's in orbit. He is in an orbit that he ought to be able to meet up with the station if he's lucky. He actually was at a very close point at that periapsis, but that was also the same point where Val was entering into the atmosphere, and I chose to be with her because he can always just go around perpetually. We don't have any life support mods installed or anything like that, so I like to think that Kerbals just don't need to eat to metabolize the way humans do. That's what all that is. It's like they can survive without food. They're capable of doing that. Okay, so what does that mean for us? That means that we need to kind of go get him. We have the space station here, and my idea was to get him to the space station and then maybe meet up with somebody. But I don't know that that's going to work, so I think I'm going to do a rescue mission just to get him. I don't know. It's not really going to get me science. That's just going to spend money. I could do these orbits are for different satellites, and but I already have a bunch of relays, so it's not like I need any more of those really. And I kind of wanted to send. I sent a probe to Moho and Eve, just flybys. I think I technically orbited Eve for a few seconds, but flybys, and then it went to Jewel, and it did hit a couple of the moons, including Lathe, but I lost control of that probe. Actually, it's still out there somewhere, I think, or I might have deleted it. It's still out there. So, got this interplanetary probe. It was at Jewel, but it was too far away. I had a good relay comm on there, but apparently not a big enough one. So that was our main problem. Now I don't know that I picked it up, but I gotta get a direction because I don't have a direction anymore. Like getting to Duna, that was a good direction, but I don't know. What do we want to do next? I think I want to explore a lot more of Jewel. Maybe we need to send Kerbal there with just a ton and ton of Delta V or something like that. Or we could send a probe back out to Jewel and also try and hit Elu at some point or another as well. We also, uh-oh, I didn't mean to do that. We also need to go to Dres. We've not been to Dres yet either. So those are a couple of the moons of Jewel, Elu, and Dres, which are always the hardest ones, quite frankly. We also didn't do Gilly, Eve's moon, because it was just too small, but we did have gone to Ike. So, what should we do next? I don't know. I don't know. That's not relevant to this game. Gather scientific data from Lathe and return home. Yeah, let's do this. And we're going to send a Kerbal or two, I think. So, let's see here. We don't need to do the whole lander thing that I just did. I mean, I'll open it up just to show you what I did. The moon hopper is what I called it. It's a pretty big beast of a rocket there with kind of an oversized fairing. But underneath that oversized fairing were two modules. And the problem is, this, to my chagrin, only fits one Kerbal. So this was our getting back home ship, and this was our excursion on the surface ship. It had asparagus staging, so to speak, but it went for these two first, and then those two second, and then these two last. And this little moon hopper, it worked extremely well. I could probably go back to the moon to a different location, do the same thing, get even more science, do it the same thing on Minimus. I imagine it'd be even more successful on Minimus. I could probably go all over that little planet, but I want to wait till I have scanning ability. I think that's just going to make that process of getting science much easier once I have the scanners. So that being said, I'm going to just do something that holds two people but has a ton of Delta V. So we're just going to do a new craft, and no, we don't want to save this one. Okay, so that one does fit 2, so that might be an option, but it needs to be designed to come back. This one is tiny, it fits 2. This one fits 3. This one's not one that I've actually ever worked with before. It's like it looks kind of like the actual Moonlander, or at least a derivation of it. Kind of different. Looks like, does it have fuel? Yeah, it has its own fuel, so I guess you just put a little engine on it. Call it a day. Maybe that's a little bit strange. Okay, so yeah, it's got some decent Delta V, I guess, with that. I guess maybe it's designed to have a bigger. It's kind of weird. No, there is a thing way up there. Okay, so we do that. That's not very much. Can I shove it up in there? Like, there we go. Yeah, see, that looks so much better, doesn't it? Alas, I don't care. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted like a squirrel. Squirrel! Ooh, shiny new thing I never played with. Okay, and look, we got some more probes as well. So we got the Probidobidine OKTO2, which does, I think, have some limited scanning ability, doesn't it? Scan modes, biome, and terrain. So we probably actually want to start doing that, because that's all I need to actually do the kind of science that I'm looking to do. Interesting. Do I need the scanners to do it, or will the probe do it? I don't know. Honestly, don't. Oh, excuse me. Don't mean to yawn in your face. Okay. Nice small little probe too. Okay, but I think maybe we do this. Just float on a tin can. If we did that, then it could re-enter with that. Couldn't they? Maybe not. Maybe that's not the best choice. Maybe this one would be a better choice. Let's look at the weight. 1.515, 2.72. So that's heavier. That fits the same amount, and it is a little bit heavier actually than the lander can, but it's shaped slightly better. What are my other options here? Not good. Now I could always just maybe do something simple like that, and then go to my utility here, grab something like this or like this. But I don't like that. That's not sexy. I still can't decide. I'm sorry. I just can't decide what I want yet. This is like the Darth Vader capsule. Actually, I've seen one of these up close. I say one of these, what it's based off of, which is the Gemini capsule, which they said you didn't really get into it as much as put it on to wear it. And it's pretty tiny up in there. I wouldn't want to do a deep space mission in one of those. Oh, why don't we break a science lab? Don't we have a science lab? Ooh, okay. So we have the science lab here. That'll fit 2 people, so why don't we just do like this one with the science lab? Oh, it's kind of heavy, so not really designed for a good Delta V. So maybe not. That actually looks like it'd be a much better start for another station. Yeah, so if we're going for Delta V primarily, then I think we stick with maybe like maybe just do the Mark 1 lander can, knowing that we only send 1 Kerbal. But I like the idea of having 2 Kerbals. That way we have a scientist, and that actually saves us a lot of weight. So I'm going to go with this, and I'm sticking to that. Okay, but we can go with the rover variant. I think that is just got better utility to it. Yes. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and choose our engine. I think Terrier was fine when I used it last time. I think this kind of mount is just fine for this application. And that just means we need to find a place to put fuel. But I don't know, maybe we need to think this through a little bit better. Maybe sorry, clicked off of it. Maybe instead what we do is a proper tank. Maybe not that big of a tank. I think this is the one I was thinking of, yes. That's our 350 vac. Yeah, okay. The Poodle, which looks completely different now. Let's see, in a vacuum, it's going to give us 3,000 just for that. Now, I kind of want to be able to stage, but I don't like that big old contraption having the 3 big barrels. I don't think that worked too well. And we have more space because we're not trying to land on the surface or anything, so we can have a bit larger of a deal, so to speak. Ooh, that did not feel good. Oh. I guess we need a decoupler here. There he is. There it is, coupling. A couple different decouplers here. Inline clampotron. Oh. Yeah, okay. I find that to be utterly useless, quite frankly. Yeah, I guess we just maybe use one of these. I guess it could be sideways. And then we would throw like this on there. This is what I used on the last thing. But it's kind of bulky. You know what we could do? Do something more like this. But then we have these. Which we could do something like that. And then you just asparagus it up. Like that. Yeah, so look at that. 2607. 26, so we kind of doubled it. Now that honestly, that would be the first one that you want to go, because then what I'll do is I'll do something like this. Now this might be tricky. Might not be able to use that. What we'd have to do instead is use something more like this. Yes, and then do it again here. Leve. Hard to see all the way back there. It's pretty good. Okay. So now we get asparagus. So you'd have one of these go directly to the center. And then the other one you'd have go to that one. And then the last one you have go to that one. And so if you look at the fuel delivery overlay, you get your asparagus stage in there. Right, okay, and so also we can take out this monopropellant. That'll help increase with our thing, and then we need to check the whole staging. Right, so that is first. These. Which one are these? And we need to take that overlay off, I think, honestly. Not helping. Yeah, so these go last. And these go second last, and these go first. Just like that. So now we have 24. Call that 44. 55. 67. Not too shabby, and it's nice and compact, so to speak. Now what we probably would still want to do is go ahead and do a little bit of command and control here, just to be able to wield this thing. And actually that gives us enough room that we could maybe go back to the full deal that we had instead of these. After doing all that work, I know. But now we can put these back because we have space, I think, to do it. Space up top and space below, which is what we need. Bingo. Nope. Okay, there's bingo. Okay. Now, those go last, so those go straight in. Like that. And then these connect to those. And then these connect to those. There we go. So now we got 24, 46, 58, 68. So almost 7,000 meters per second, which we'll find a way to use. All right. Now that's being said, that's blank. It's not going to read really that, but I'm going to stop it there before we get into any more madness, so to speak. Now, we need to have some sort of science going on this thing. So, Could put the Science Junior there, I think. Ooh. How are we going to do re-entry? I need to rethink this whole design. I think it's not going to work. At least not going to work in this stage, because we do need to have a re-entry stage. And to have a re-entry stage with this particular platform, what we basically need is a heat shield. And, oh, maybe not that big of a heat shield, but still this big at least. I actually don't want that to be on a re-entry thing. I just want more or less this. So we need to start off by just designing backwards, okay? So we're going to need parachutes. Or maybe one big parachute. Kind of don't like that though. We could do a couple parachutes like this. I kind of like that. Yeah, kind of like that. Okay. And then what else do we need for re-entry? It actually has some built-in electric charge, but we could add to it. Okay. And then I don't know if we want to put photovoltaics here. Something like that. Though we don't necessarily need these on re-entry. But I'll leave them there like that anyway, okay. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need on re-entry. I think that's it. We got parachutes. We have power, and we have heat shield protection. What else could one want? Okay, so then we no, still one more. Okay, there we go. Do a decoupler. Something like that. I don't think we need to do that though. We could just do it like this, because this is all going to be behind a fairing, right? And so then if we're going to do that, then to do this part, you do that, so it would separate. And you'd actually put these more like this. Yeah, that's how you would do that. And I wonder if we could use one of these plates. So now I got 2 nodes on there. And what I could do is disable the staging, because it wouldn't be for that. And disable the shroud, because it wouldn't be for that either. And we would stick engines, or I'm sorry, we would just stick fuel tanks straight onto there. Oh, it's not going to let me. Oh, that's a shame. Don't we have maybe something similar and structural? Do we have one of those yet? Sort of do. Guess it's really this one is the one we want. That's kind of really what we're looking for right there. That was a little weird. Here we go. We have 2 engines. I kind of just want the one. If we're going to just do one, you just do a... I know I'm not... It's not like I have this planned out in my head. I'm kind of going all over the place, I realize. And that's not shabby. That's 4,000 right there. It is a lot cleaner looking. Maybe instead I do the big one. And honestly, you'll want to put one of these in. And that's not shabby at all. That's what I'm looking for. And it does have a pretty shabby thrust to weight ratio, so it's going to take a long time. I guess we could, at cost and honestly a bit inefficiently long on the one hand, but what we could do is something more like this, and then kind of just copy it down here. Only difference being that we wouldn't need that. So that's 27, or 28, 38, 39, 41. Wait a minute, I thought we had... Oh, and that was a much bigger thing. That's like 41. Okay. 41, 49, maybe 5. So that's maybe 5 right there versus this. Which is actually more efficient. You wouldn't necessarily think it, but it is. Okay. Now, here's the real question. Is that more efficient? Or, I actually already know the answer to this. Is this more efficient? And you really only gain about 700 meters per second. And I think the thrust to weight is far less. Interestingly enough. You would think it'd be a much bigger gain in efficiency. But do we have any just fuselages? So they're pretty tiny still. So we get that one. Let's see, instead of doing that setup there, let's do something different. We can maybe go back to my original idea, doing this. Maybe we even do something like this. That's pretty good. That doesn't quite equal that, but it is a much cleaner. Well, no, it'd really be this tall. It's still less height, and it's almost equivalent. And I got slightly better thrust to weight ratio. I mean, just slightly better. Interesting. I'm thinking about it. Makes me want to research into the fuselage tree a little bit more now, because I think I can actually get more efficient. But then also, if I just get to ion propulsion, I really will be able to go places, at least with probes. I think I gotta go with this one here. So the question is, how do we transition back to something sane? So what was that? That's 3. Hey, let's see. Is 4 better? Or is 3 better? 47.89. Yeah. There's no way to just do that. Okay. I don't know how well that will work. I'll bet you they'll get stuck. Take the shrouds off. Yeah. And then we go back to this guy here. There we go. Just need the 1, not the 4. And then we close it all up. Bam. Okay, but before I do that, let's finish up what we got here. Because we have that science, but we also need comms and stuff like that. Okay, so okay. So I need this antenna. Oh my god, look at that sucker. Look at that sucker. Ooh, baby. That's a big mother. Ooh. Talk about phoning home. But I'm trying to go to Joule, remember? So, what does that do to my Delta V? It kills it. 502 to 49. That's not actually that bad. Alright, I'll keep it. I mean, it's just such a big honker. Now, wait a minute. Is this one? Well, I could use this one. What's the downside of using this? What's the downside? Electric charge 200 per second. 68 per second. So this one is way more power hungry. Okay. But how much electric charge do I have on the vessel? Oh, it's going to tell me somewhere. It'd be up here if I was in the thing, but I have something like, I got 100 right there. And 4 times 4 is 16, so I have 1700. So I actually have enough electric power. Now I might need to upgrade my photovoltaics here. I could actually do that. What we could do, it'd be nice if we had that breaking ground, the robotics, because what I could do is something like this. Now, it would be better to use the small one too. Oh, what did I do? I pushed the Windows button. There we go. This is way harder than I really ought to be. Something like that, but honestly, after all that work, I don't like it at all. I hate it. Maybe we just do something more simple. So it would be instead of this. Be a lot less weight too. Yeah, 0.1 compared to 0.65. Brings me back up to a little over 5. It's also just easier to put in the fairing for no other reason. Yes, I like this. Okay. Let's put the rest of the science on here. So I want to make it fairly accessible to whoever is going to be resetting the science. So we're going to stick it all kind of just right over here. Whew. Pardon me. Whew. Okay. Still works great. Okay. So now we need a really good transfer stage. So we want to use this like in the situation. So we're going to have a really, really big rocket. Like obnoxiously big. That's not it. Okay. That's not it. What? I'm confused. That's the Curbodyne. Ah, here we go. Maybe not that yet. Maybe this. And what would it be the Rhino, wouldn't it be? Not even, man, it's something bigger. Ooh. It's not the Mastodon. That is pretty darn good. Wonder if we have something sized for this. So the Rockomax is not big enough. But the Curbodynes... Oh, here we go. It's interesting how much less that is for almost the same. It's basically just because it's not as big volume. It just works differently. That was up here. What's this thing? Is that the bigger form factor? It is. That's what I already got out. Here we go. No, not structural. There we go. I think that's probably my highest thrust engine right there. Pretty sure that's my highest thrust engine right there. With, well, it's not big enough. So I guess what you'd do is you'd stick the Saturn V base on. I wonder what engine is made to go with that. Surely not the shuttle engines. Is it the skiff? The skiff looks like it might be appropriate. The skiff is really for vacuum. 240 kilonewtons. That's 936. Yeah, 290. I mean, so let's look at our mainsail here. That is got 288. So this is actually more efficient in and out of atmosphere. 1283 versus, yeah, so 1283. What do we got here? 240. So this might be it. I think this is what it was designed to be. You stick a fifth one in there. Mild. No. What do you get? So wait, oh. Come on, let's put it like this, boys. There we go. Yeah, so that gets you a pretty good thrust to weight ratio. And it's an appropriately large rocket. Well, you gotta change this fare now. Wow. How is that compared to just throwing this on the bottom somehow? 2592. 2642. This is a little bit less. And that doesn't have nearly the thrust to weight ratio. So this is actually the way to go if we're going to go big like this. Or we just, not what we want. Oh my god. Unless we just use a bunch of these, which I kind of don't want to do. Okay, so there's all that. What else? We're going to have to definitely go through the structure and check our staging as well. Can't tell which one will go first. I'm thinking it's probably this way though. And then these four go with those four engines, so and that's extraneous. You get those two, and then you land. Okay. Now, Richard attachment, auto strut. Let's auto strut to root. Attachment, auto strut to root. Yeah, we want to change that. I think this could honestly be pared back down to 4. I think that's more than enough. It honestly could almost just be 2. But okay. Okay, we are all strutted up. I wish that was more automatic, quite frankly. Why wouldn't you default to having it rigid and auto strutted? But what do I know? Okay, I think we are ready. Okay. Dueling for action. Let's also do some of this stuff. We don't want an engineer. We want a scientist. Pretty stupid, but kind of. There we go. This is our kind of guy. All right. Somebody with a lot of courage, but is also pretty stupid. That's what we want. All right. There we go. Now, have any action groups? Yes, we do. But not really, not on this one. Okay. So we'll save that for real this time, and then we will launch. Let's hope I thought through everything this time. It's nothing worse than doing a whole big old long mission and just to realize you didn't put a heat shield or parachutes on it. There's nothing worse than that. Alright. Put that on. Put that on. TZ. And go. Oh, she's a biggin'. need to do is I probably need to put some boosters on till this got to be an appropriate thrust to weight ratio, which is only now really getting to. Let's do that. I almost look quaint. Here we go. It's a better thrust to weight ratio, and so is that. Okay. Still not super stellar, but I mean, this is just a huge ship. It's got like 1200 Delta V or something like that to start with. Thought we were auto strutted. I took some of my wings off. But if I rotate it, it ought to give me the important ones. Hate it when that happens. That is a gorgeous sight. That big rocket. Gonna F5 this. Stage that. Just a little bit to get away from that. Okay, and then we want to get up here to our apoapsis and orbitify. Okay, and we're just going to stick with going prograde instead of going straight for the target for this one, because it's a simple enough maneuver and it's actually more efficient if you go just straight on prograde. Doesn't really make a difference. It 6 one way, half dozen the other. Okay, ready to burn now. Oh man, that is glorious looking. Okay, there we go. We are in orbit now. We need to plan our exit to Jool. Wonder if we try and go around like this, or if we just try and shoot out, or if we wait in our honestly just orbit around and wait till we're more like right here in our orbit and then push it up to Jool. It's probably the smartest thing to do. These guys are going to just hang out in orbit, I think, for a while. Thank you to my dog, Rocky. Okay, so, I don't think I've had a materials bay out here. No, I have. Okay. I took a shot. Gotta take a shot sometimes, you know? Take a shot. Alright. So I'm going to quick save that, and then I'm going to go to the Space Center so I can fast forward. Okay. Dueling for action. And Bob's still just hanging out in orbit, too. I'm not worried about him for now. I'll rescue him eventually. I'll get him back, but we hired another guy. Does his job just as well. Not as trained up, but doesn't bother Valentina on the long trip as much. He's not as scared. Okay. That's great. Okay, now let us. All right, so we're going positive. So we're gonna just go that way. So we want to do it about right here. And honestly, we need to do it on the next orbit. Honestly, I think I need to wait till it's more like over here, just because I'm gonna have to burn prograde, and so it's not gonna quite be what this shows. It's because I'm not going through the moon anymore. Let's pare this way down. I think that's good enough for now. Here we go. Now we're just going to fast forward to our burn. Gonna fix our attitude a little bit here. And we are burning. Go to F5 because I'm not. This is not exactly entirely planned. So I just planned it enough. Or maybe I didn't. That's why I just had to save it. Actually save it there, and then I'm going to keep on just burning prograde. See where it gets me. So what's my deal? I'm way back there, so it's going too fast. It's going to take me too long to get out there. Okay. Not quite how I thought we would do it, but you know what? I'll take it. gotta look at my weather because we got tornadoes in close to the area, or we did. Looks like we're still okay for now. You know, there's not much I can do from down here, huh? I guess really the only thing I could do Ooh. $50,000 is the atmosphere, which is what I was looking for. Okay. Yeah, so 67. Maybe a little bit closer, but you really don't want to be much closer than that. Well, what makes me think I'm going to get that exact anyway, this far out. Yeah, so we'll leave it at that. I don't have enough delta V. I don't have enough delta V. Oy vey. Doing this all the wrong way. I shouldn't have done that last quick save. Oy vey. So how can we salvage this thing? Can we try and get to maybe Duna instead? Or something? I don't know. I don't think that's gonna do much better. Okay. So what we might need to do is just be even more patient than I really want it to be. Do it like out here somewhere. I'm not giving up yet. That's my spot right there. Okay. So let's focus back on Jewel. Ooh, look at that. Thanks to Tylo, I get an actual capture. Ooh, actual capture. I'll take that. See if I can get it even better. I think that's about as good as I'm going to get. Okay, so only a year, almost 2 years till we burn. So it's going to take us quite a while to get out to Jewel. Hope they brought some snacks. So we're still very much in the shadow of Kerbin. Let's see. I think this ought to be new. It is indeed. I know this will be new. You only get 12 science for it. No usable comms. Well, what about this? Tell me that's usable. That scared me for a second there. I was like, wait a minute. That's what that was supposed to be for. Oh, excuse me. Oh, look, and she is upgraded to level 3, it looks like. I've never had anybody upgrade to level 4 or 5. Or if I have, I don't remember. I don't even understand. What does that do? Because you can't add any more of these, so what does it do for you? I don't know. I forgot what I was going to do. What do we got to do? Oh, yeah, we got an EVA Bob. Actually, this is Lodsy, which is a horrible name. Can we rename you? Alright, EVA report. Yeah, we'll keep that. Restore that. Climb on that. Have we done a mystery goo? I probably have. But look, we'll keep that anyway. Collect data. Restore it. That's why we bring the second Kerbal. Right there. Get all that extra science. Alright, world's first. Get off of it. Thank you. World's first milestones. Formed a spacewalk in orbit of the sun. Cool. Alright, and yeah, okay, so target, anti-target. Just point at the maneuver node. Oh, that is glorious. That is so glorious. Okay, where do... Oh, this is Jewel. It's better, okay. We'll warp to there for now. Uh-oh. I was going to watch Kerbin go by, but it's already gone. Wherever it is. I think I might start to go back into modding and just do a couple of good visual mods, like the long distance planet, and maybe doing super far away planets. Always liked those, and I never really, like, I had them on my reaching for the stars, but I never really got out there. Never really ended up doing it. And to get this big thing all the way out here as it is. I am getting tired, I'll be honest. I am getting there. I am indeed. Oh, that's not necessarily what I wanted to do. But yeah, let's. So we want to warp here. Man, it's just taking forever. I wish they had a good way to focus view back the maneuver node editor that you used to have when you with the as a mod used to give you that option, but this just does not. I think. Be nice if they gave you that little button though. Let's go ahead and F5 this in case we overshoot our maneuver, because that's never happened before, ever. Alright, 10 seconds to burn. I don't have to worry about where I'm pointed because Val has got that covered. Burn. Oh, and Lotsie is loving it too. I love that Lotsie is loving it. Nice. Why is it doing that? I guess I'll take that. It's not what I was thinking I was going to get, but darn, I don't know what happened. I was on my maneuver the whole time. I burnt directly. I didn't really have much of a skip between stages. I don't know. That kind of sucks. Okay, I can do something like this. Let's just go to the maneuver. Let's see if I can just burn this basically this way right now. I'm going to F5. Let's see what I get. I get a free capture here. I keep burning and it stays in the ecliptic more or less. That's more or less what I want. Okay. Keep going, see if we get maybe an advantageous second moon encounter. Oh, we do. Tyler there. I might adjust it when I'm like go out over here. So how much Delta V do I have left? So we got 4,000 Delta V. And I am captured. It's just a matter of time. Okay. Ooh. Which one is this one? Tyler. So I hear the thunder, but the radar doesn't show anything. Okay, we're fine. Everything's fine. We're all fine here. How are you? Okay. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll do that. It's only 16 meters per second. And we get a second encounter with it. I'll take that. Fun ones are going to be Bop and Pole. So, alright. Okay, F5. Quick save this sucker. And then I wonder if I can just warp to here. Here, let's stop it for a second. I'm going to point at my target. The amount of time it's going to take. Oh my goodness. That was over 6 years. I'm going to look at something, because why isn't it relaying off my satellite that's here at Duna? I'm going to switch to it and see what's going on. So I got this thing here. See, it is connected to Dueling for Action. Okay. Just thought I'd check, see what's going on with that. Didn't make sense to me. Are we, what can I do but sit back and wait? Look at the weather, I guess. Yeah, see? No good. Nice. Okay. All right. Getting some science again. And we got, that's it? What about the spacewalking stuff? Okay. Let's go back to our map here. Okay, 2 hours to burn. Valentina and Lotzi are making their final preparations. Valentina is going to point towards the maneuver node. We're going to speed up warp just a little bit. F5 as well. Okay, here we go. It's just a 2-second burn. Bingo. Woo. Looks like a fun roller coaster ride. Okay. Gonna F5 that. And then at this periapsis here, we want to alter it a little bit so that we're not going so crazy. Just not the right place to affect the orbit, I guess. See if this is a better place to affect it. Okay. There we go. Oh, that sends me out. I don't want to go out. Guess we can get in close to Jool. You just need to stay over 200 meters, okay. Or 200 kilometers. I am so... Oh. Here we go. Nope, too much. Still too much. Okay. I think that's all good. We'll see how that goes. Oh boy, we made it. Okay. That's in 1 hour. Instead of going back to Tyler, we get to go to Vol. And that'll be better for our science gathering purposes. Okay. Okay, ready to burn. It's going to be a 11-second burn. And 1, 0, burn. And I will just stop while I'm behind. All right. Nope. I don't think we're going to get it in space, though, around this thing. So it's time to move on. Okay, she's a level 4 pilot now. I don't know what that means compared to a level 3, but... Seven days. Wow, I'm in my encounter. Okay. Woo! Good thing I stopped it when I did. All right. Entered orbit. We did that a while ago. Initiate first flyby. Get the first science data. Nice. Okay. I still have 3897 Delta V. So let's just see for giggles, what would it take to get home? Ooh, sorry. Honestly, it's almost time for me to just end this, and I'll have to continue it another day. Ugh, that's annoying. Alright, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. Thanks for watching.